Hello, I'm Shubhangi Shah from The Week magazine. Today we have with us a young filmmaker, Neel Soni, whose film Babli By Night has been recently longlisted for BAFTA Student Award in the documentary category. Neel is born and brought up in New Delhi and has studied at the Pratt Institute. His film Babli By Night tells the story of Babli, or Babban, a transgender forest guard at the Jim Corbett National Park. Bablis is a story of desires, of resilience, of heartbreak, and their deep connect with the nature they guard. Congratulations, Neel, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
The first question I want to ask you is about your film subject, Babli or Babban. How did you come across their story, and what struck with you that you made a film on them?
So it's quite interesting because I've been a wildlife photographer and been into photography since I was like 9 years old.
Yeah.
And over many trips to the forest, I encountered this person. It was actually very interesting the first time I met Babban.
Okay.
Which was I was on a safari trip, leaving for an afternoon drive, and there was this forest guard standing like this with a gun. Okay, and like looking super authoritative and hardcore, just like making sure the cars are leaving on time.
Yeah.
No one's gonna misbehave in the forest, all of that. And I come back, and that same forest guard, that evening I was 13 at the time, the same forest guard in the evening is dancing in a salwar kameez.
Okay, fascinating.
Like in front of a bonfire, and I was like, this is new.
Yeah.
And so then sort of I was taken aback initially, but I was also very intrigued. I was like, what is this? What's going on here? I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was 11 years ago. So post that, I was like, sort of over the next couple of years, developed a relationship with Babban and understand who Babban was as a person. And through that sort of connection, it just sort of developed into trust, and it developed into a relationship that was far deeper than just on the surface.
Yeah.
And through that, I sort of understood that there was this person who had a desperation to be seen and to be heard, and who really wanted their voice to be out in the world, and it hadn't. And this person that had dealt with this incredible amount of adversity, and still found a space and a medium to make themselves happy, and to find that happiness, and to like find the peace and the joy, and through all of it just be resilient, and so it was something I was fascinated by. And when Babban and I started talking about this as a concept, both of us were very excited by it. Neither of us knew what we were getting into, and so we kind of started filming in July 2020 in COVID, right after the first lockdown ended.
Right.
And it ended up spanning into a 4-year journey full of ups and downs. Crazy things happened. But eventually we got here, and I mean, it's just been the most beautiful journey ever.
It's a fascinating story. I mean, it takes you through so many aspects of Babban's life, like their relationship with their mother, which is not very... We cannot describe it as a very good relationship because the mother is not able to accept Babban's sexuality. Then it tells you about their relationship with the city, with the people, their HIV diagnosis. But there is a running theme which tells about Babban's connection with the forest, which is a constant thing. Maybe a different filmmaker might have focused on their HIV diagnosis or their relationship with their mother. You chose to spotlight on their relationship with the nature. Why was that the case? Does it also like reflect a filmmaker's relationship with the nature as well? As you said that you are a wildlife.
Absolutely. Like for me, see, I feel like films like this and on subjects like this tend to sensationalize trauma, right? It gets often even like voyeuristic and like into those spaces, and that was something I really didn't even want to touch upon. And even like that's a very big reason why I've sort of, even in the cut, if you watch the film, I don't dwell on the drama too much. I talk about it, and it's shown there, but I don't linger. And so the whole point of view of the film and the whole thing that I kind of wanted to achieve was, there's this person who's gone through an incredible amount of adversity in their life, and it's like no one should go through all of that.
Right.
Yet still they found that space that they can be happy and thrive within. And that's a remarkable thing, right? And so my point of view was, I found myself in a lot of ways in that jungle. and sort of doing wildlife photography and understanding myself. So that was me sort of bringing myself to the film in a lot of ways, and just still yet not making it about me.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, what is the perspective I can bring to a story like this that's sort of different to any way that it's been done before.
Yeah.
And to try and sort of talk about it from my own personal point of view of, I have also obviously very different problems in life, very different worlds, but it gave me that space and it gave me that medium where it worked for me like exactly the same way.
Seriously.
Yeah. So from that point of view, that is sort of the story I wanted to tell, and that's what I set out to tell. It was not about, let's talk about adversity, let's talk about all this, let's offer no solutions and no hope.
Right.
Because we're dealing with such a world of lack of understanding, right? Like, it's such a massive lack of understanding that if you sort of don't address the fact that there is a solution, that solution has worked over n number of years, then what's the point of just talking about adversity, right? For adversity's sake. And you show the strength and resilience of a person who's found this medium that's just unbelievably amazing for them. And you see it on the other hand when the same person sort of comes out into an urban space, it's like a switch. It's a switch, right? So from that point of view, it was like, that is the film I set out to make. It was never about, let's just go and highlight this and this problem, you know, because again, that's sort of where you slip into sensationalizing trauma, and that's something I really didn't want to do.
Criticizing trauma
Exactly.
also to some
Exactly. So it was just, that was like something I had to be very careful of.
So I might be wrong in my judgment, but I could see two styles of storytelling in your film. So the shots that are there in the nature, which tells their relationship with the nature, they are very aesthetically shot. They're very pleasing to the eye, very National Geographic kind. But when we switch to city, it is more realistic. It's not very good to see. Was it a very conscious decision to employ these two very different styles of storytelling?
Absolutely. Like, the whole film, like every bit of it that you watch is about duality.
Okay.
Right? It's about two lives. It's about two worlds. It's about two people. Right? And so it's like, and two opinions. Right? So and two wants and two conflicts, it just keeps going. The whole film is about duality, whether we're talking about the way the film starts with the Babban, the mother, Babban, the mother, Babban, the mother, and you sort of just go back and forth. Right? Whether we talk about the forest versus the city, whether we talk about Babban and Babli. Right? It's just all about duality. And so it was a very conscious decision where we were like, let's show these visuals as per what Babban is feeling in them.
Fascinating.
Right? And so it was, so we shot like that. And like the stuff in the jungle was, you know, on gimbals, like beautiful cinematic visuals. And then when we came in the city, we took the camera off the gimbals and held it in our hands. So that we were like, let's just get some shakiness in this. Because, and also the idea was, as the film kind of progresses from jungle to city and city to jungle, the jungle should be smooth and calm and peaceful. And then when you get to the city, it should just get more and more shaky. And you're sort of, it's reflecting Babban's mind. You know, and so yes, it was a fully intentional decision, and I'm so glad you brought it up because no one's brought it up yet. And I'm glad you noticed it because it was something we'd planned from the very beginning.
That was very striking to me. In fact, the last shot where Babban in a pink suit just lies on a tree, so calm, so peaceful, as if they are finally at peace with themselves. That is stunning. But one more thing that was striking to me in the film, which you would tell me if I got it right, was that, you know, you said that you wanted to shoot this film in a different way. Transgender documentaries are several in South Asia. But what was different about your film was, in most part of the film, Babban or Babli wasn't shown in the feminine attire, in the stereotypical transgender attire. Was it again, they are shown in forest guard uniform, in shirt, pant. Was it again a conscious decision to shoot the most part so that their transgender identity is not so apparent to the viewer? So the difference is more striking.
So that's interesting. But basically it was not conscious. The idea was also, like, if you think of it as Babli by night, right? In a lot of ways, and most of the time Babban is in that form at night.
Okay.
Because in the day, Babban has to be this forest guard that's protecting these animals, that's patrolling this forest, that's putting their life in danger every day by doing all this stuff, right? By like protecting our wild spaces and at the same time sort of kind of finding solace in that. So it was to try and be as real and truthful to the story as possible. And to try and be as honest in our storytelling about what we were trying to do. And so if you notice in the film, barring maybe one sequence, most of the stuff where Babban is in a salwar kameez is at night.
Right, yes.
And so that's the whole idea of the film. It's called Babli By Night. It's about there's Babban in the day and then there's Babli at night. And that switch just happens.
Yeah.
You know, and that it links back to the first time I also met Babban.
Okay.
And that whole forest guard to salwar kameez at night. And so yes and no, but it's a very interesting thing to notice.
It was an unconscious thing that
it was quite unconscious. I mean, we shot as per how Babban decided Babban wanted to dress. There was no, I never said dress like this or dress like this. You know, Babban was like, I was basically between a discussion, I was like, why don't we do one sequence? And that's the only sequence that Babban's wearing a salwar kameez in the day is in the forest when Babban's lying down.
In the last shot.
Yeah, the last shots of the film. That's the only time, because then that was also an intentional thing, because we shot that in the day specifically because it was kind of like reflecting this light of hope that's sort of coming in, and it's no longer something that has to be hidden and in the darkness. And there's nothing dark about it. And so that's sort of how we kind of visually thought about the film.
That's amazing storytelling. But you know, throughout your film, there are several heartbreaking moments. But one that was specifically heartbreaking for me was where the mother breaks down when she talks about her challenges and that how she wants Babban to just get married to a decent girl. That's what she says. And then she tells you, if it's done, please switch off the camera. But the camera stays on her for a few seconds while she breaks down. As a filmmaker, how do you manage such moments? How do you understand that here is where I have to draw the line, where I cannot go too deep into this person's vulnerability, while at the same time getting enough for the viewers? Like, how do you manage these aspects?
Yeah, so see, it's not about, like, for me, it's never about I'm making this for the viewers.
Yeah, okay.
Right? For me, it's about I'm making this to tell this story as truthfully and as honestly and with as much sensitivity and as delicately as I possibly can. Because, like, I can never control the outcome of what a viewer will think of my film. I have to do what my responsibility, especially in this film, is to Babban and his family. Right? It's not about how can I make the sauciest or juiciest film. Right? And so that's kind of where I had to draw a line. And like throughout the film, we had to make hundreds of moral decisions. Right? We were like, because again, you're talking about an area that's just, there's no understanding for this topic, right? And it's laughed at and people are telling me you're wasting your time and all of that kind of stuff. So it's something that was very conscious, that moment. And so I switched the camera off. Literally, we left it rolling for 5 seconds and I cut the camera. Because I wanted to respect these people and their privacy, and they were trusting me and putting a lot of faith in me by telling me their story. Right? And that put a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to make sure that this story was told accurately and with the right balance of truth and sensitivity. And I didn't want to sort of, again, sensationalize anything. So it was, every choice had to be very conscious and very well thought out because it was just such a high stakes thing that was going on there. And so that's sort of where I started drawing lines. Like, even that there are moments, right, that we probably have that would have made a much saucier film. It would have been much more masala, right? I removed those moments consciously, knowing that I have a responsibility to make sure that nothing wrong or something that could harm my subject or their mental health in any capacity, or their family for that matter, or job, any of that stuff in any capacity will not go in this film.
Are you talking about the Babli By Night aspect of the film?
Both. You know, I mean, just in terms of, we had moments that would have made a much juicier film. But for me, it was a very much like moral decision that I was like, this is not happening. Like, and between my editor and myself, we were both just like nitpicking everything and rechecking and then making sure Babban was comfortable even after having consensually recorded it, coming back, showing him, being like, is this okay? Then going back, putting it into the film. You know, and so it had to be done like that. There was no other way to do it other than that, because you tread one step out of line, something can go wrong. And that's not a risk that's worth taking, because a person's put so much trust and faith in you, then why would you screw them over? You know what I mean?
Of course. And the tone of the film completely changes when you include certain elements.
Exactly.
I mean, Baban's story is marginalization on two elements, like a Muslim transgender. We see two parts of marginalization there. When you go into lives of these people, like what is there for a documentary filmmaker there? What does a filmmaker get apart from the fact that he's putting out a film out in the world?
I think I evolved a lot as a person over the journey, and I think I learned about perspectives and points of view that I had never maybe sort of understood.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how much effect conditioning has on people, right? And coming back to that moment with the mother, like you sort of realize that, and it was like I was almost in tears in that room because it was like, here was this person who wanted so much, who had so many desires, but at 15 years old, she was sent to a forest and she lived there for the rest of her life, had 7 kids in the forest, right? And she's at that very moment that she's finally breaking down about it, right? So for me, it was like, this is crazy. And so it's you just evolve and you see new perspectives and points of view and parts of the world that otherwise you wouldn't see, you know. And I think that it's so important that those sort of stories come out in the world, and they do. And I see Indian documentary films in the last couple of years just succeeding, you know, and being able to make a mark on the global stage, and that's so good. And like these stories that are so powerful with and have impact, and the Western audience and the global audience is actually able to see that. You know, and that's a matter of great pride for me, because that's finally a medium where nothing is being sensationalized yet, it is just being spoken about. You know, and I think in the long run, I can never change the conditioning or the way someone thinks. But I hope I can create a little bit of impact that empowers them.
I'm sure when more and more people would watch your documentary, I'm sure there would be some change in some person's mindset. Like, which brings me to the next question, like, when is it premiering in India?
So that's a great question. We have no idea. I am in the process of trying to find distribution. I would love for a streamer to try and pick it up. And so that's the goal that we're trying to get to right now. We are doing screenings in festivals and sort of private screenings globally right now, like starting next month. And we will be doing a screening in London, screening in New York at New York Indian Film Festival. And as and when we know more, we will put out more information. So right now, in terms of premiere, I have no date that I can give. Hopefully around July. And hopefully it can sort of get out in the world and find a permanent home where it can kind of live and people can see it. Because I think for the longest time, because we have sort of a weirdish runtime of 24 minutes for a short film, it was not getting into as many festivals as we had hoped. And so I had gotten to a point where I was questioning the film I made, right? And I was like, have I just butchered this story? What have I done? What have I done wrong? And like a lot of self-doubt crept in. And that was the first time it's ever happened to me. And so, but 2 weeks ago, this email came and it just, everything was validated. You know what I mean? So
how was the reaction when this BAFTA long list was announced?
I was shocked. I was so surprised because I had no idea this was happening. My university submitted it. And so it just came as a complete surprise to me. I just opened my email. It was 3 a.m. I was in bed. And I saw my email and this has happened. And I mean, I was just shocked. Like, it was just sheer shock. I'm still processing it. But I'm very, very, very grateful for it because finally someone saw us and finally someone heard us and heard more than me. It was for Babban, because I was also like, I had to tell Babban every time we didn't get into a festival or every time it wasn't happening, because Babban would ask what's happening with the film. And I had no answers for that. And finally there was someone, and it was BAFTA on a global scale. And I was like, this is the best validation that could have ever come for this film.
I mean, I personally hope that more and more people watch this film. Which brings me, like, how is Babban? Like, how are they doing?
Much better. I actually met Babban 2 days ago. Doing much better health-wise. In and out of hospital still, because HIV and hepatitis B and that sort of stuff is tricky to navigate through. But one step at a time, and hopefully with the medicine and the right healthcare and all of that, Babban can live a long and healthy life. Hopefully.
Which brings me to my last question. Like, you mentioned that so many good documentaries are coming out of India, which the world is seeing. Any documentaries that you watched recently and which you would want to recommend to our viewers?
To Kill a Tiger, Nisha
Okay.
Pahuja.
Okay.
Brilliant film.
Yeah.
Like, it's like watching something that's like, it's heart-wrenchingly good.
Okay.
And I went to a theater and I watched it in New York. And it was phenomenal. It was so good.
Okay.
And I highly, highly, highly recommend it.
Right.
And Nisha's an amazing person. And just her work is out of this world. It's such a beautiful film.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Neel Soni.
you.
Like, these were the questions we wanted to ask you. And thank you so much for your time.
You.
Thank you.